Welcome everyone to the Mission Roundtable. We're excited to get started. President Vischer, Dean Cole, Mrs. Cole, faculty, staff, students, and alumni, members of the Law School's Board of Governors and the University's Board of Trustees, colleagues and friends, it is my privilege to welcome all of you to this fall's Mission Roundtable. My name is Dan Kelly, and I serve as Dean and Mengler Chair in Law at the University of St. Thomas School of Law. The Mission Roundtable is one of the School of Law's signature events. It is an opportunity for us to come together as a community and reflect on our shared purpose, ideals, and mission. Our mission statement reads, "The University of St. Thomas School of Law, as a Catholic law school, is dedicated to integrating faith and reason in the search for truth through a focus on morality and social justice." At this Mission Roundtable, we welcome Dean G. Marcus Cole, the Joseph A. Mattson Dean and Professor of Law at Notre Dame Law School. Dean Cole will provide our keynote lecture entitled, "The Value of a Values-Based Legal Education." A native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Marcus Cole graduated from Cornell University and Northwestern University School of Law. After clerking on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit, in which he sometimes heard oral arguments right here in St. Paul, Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Twin Cities, and practicing law at Mayor Brown in Chicago, Marcus joined the faculty at Stanford Law School, where he taught for over 2 decades. At Stanford, he became a leading legal scholar of empirical law and economics, as well as bankruptcy and banking law. In 2019, perhaps growing weary of the inhospitable climate in sunny Palo Alto, California, Marcus moved to South Bend, Indiana, only occasionally sunny, where he became the 11th Dean of Notre Dame Law School. At Notre Dame, he followed in the footsteps of a long line of distinguished deans, including David Link, who later became the founding dean right here at the University of St. Thomas School of Law, one of the many links between the two universities, no pun intended. During his time at Notre Dame, Dean Cole has elevated the law school's reputation, its national ranking, its endowment, and its mission, and he has helped to launch a number of mission-aligned initiatives, including the Religious Liberty Initiative and the Global Human Rights Clinic. Following Dean Cole's opening remarks, President Rob Vischer of the University of St. Thomas will provide a brief response. Later on, all of us will have an opportunity to discuss several questions which you can find on your tables and which are inspired by Dean Cole's address. Please join me in giving a warm St. Thomas welcome to Dean Marcus Cole.
Thank you so much, Dean Dan Kelly. I'm really grateful and deeply honored to be here, to be asked here today. This place, even though this is my very first time visiting this law school, I have to tell you that this place is very special to me and has great meaning to me for 3 reasons. The first and foremost is that a man that I loved dearly, who passed away almost exactly 3 years ago today, Father David T. Link, who was the founding dean of this law school, was a mentor to me and a friend. And in fact, Angie, my wife Angie, and I live in his house today. Nothing could be more meaningful than to be in a space that is associated with one of the greatest men who's ever walked the earth. And so I'm really grateful to be in a space of the law school that he helped to found. So it's very special to me for that reason, and I'm grateful to his son, David Link, for the invitation here. The second reason is I've been a friend of President Rob Vischer for a long time when he was dean of this law school. And he and I have known each other. We've presented at different conferences together. But that friendship was never tested more than when he stole Dan Kelly away from Notre Dame. And that brings me to the third reason why I'm grateful and honored to be here, and that's because of the dean that you have. You could not have a better man, a greater scholar, or a truer friend than Dan Kelly, and I'm so grateful that he's here. And in fact, the fact that he's here is the inspiration for my talk to you today, because when he was contemplating leaving Notre Dame to come here, I truly didn't understand. He was widely regarded as a star at Notre Dame, and he was given tremendous responsibility at Notre Dame. Everyone at Notre Dame loved him and trusted him, and we couldn't understand why he would leave. But when he explained to me why he was coming here, I fully understood. In fact, as I said, it was the inspiration for my remarks today. He told me, Marcus, Notre Dame cannot be the only law school in America that advances and raises up the Catholic mission. And so you have a true mission-oriented dean in Dan Kelly. And while I miss him terribly, and I wish he were still at Notre Dame, I fully understand what he's doing here and why. And I wish him all the best here, because what he's doing is really important work. And in fact, it's the focus of my talk. When Dan asked me what I was going to talk about, I told him I'd talk about the value of a values-based legal education. And I started to think about that when Dan told me that Notre Dame can't be the only mission-oriented law school in America. So then I thought, well, what does it mean to be a mission-oriented law school? What makes this law school, or Notre Dame Law School, different? What makes me different as a Catholic scholar, a Catholic legal scholar? What do I bring that's different to the table? Well, I believe that we're at a critical inflection point in our society and in our world, and that this moment, this particular moment in history, calls for leadership. And I also believe deeply in faith-based institutions, and in particular, I believe in Notre Dame. And I believe that those faith-based institutions like Notre Dame and St. Thomas must be the source of the leadership that this world critically needs. I believe that the future of our country and of our world depend upon our leadership, and the future will look very different depending upon whether we step up to meet this challenge and responsibility. So I'm going to do three things. First, I'm going to remind us of what's happening throughout our country in higher education, but also in law schools with respect to freedom of speech and academic freedom. And most of the developments that you see are not good. And the elite institutions from which we all might have looked for leadership have completely abandoned that role. They've abdicated their authority. This is particularly and sadly true in the context of law schools, where engagement of opposing ideas is at the core of what we are supposed to be training students to do. Second, I want to describe what's happening at faith-based law schools in general and what we are doing at Notre Dame in particular. We are witnessing and nurturing a type of revival among young people who are demanding more and better from law school communities. Law students and young lawyers want meaningful practices, not just lucrative ones. We are witnessing a resurgence of confidence from alumni and donors who had lost faith in the ability of higher educational institutions to meet the challenges of our society and its culture. And we are seeing a movement of others around the world seeking leadership to fill the void in higher education and indeed in our culture. Third and finally, I want to suggest some possibilities of what the future might be if Catholic law schools step up to the challenges before us. So, first, what is happening in higher education and legal education today? Well, we've all read the headlines. We've all witnessed the protests, the near riots, and actual riots break out on college campuses across the nation when speakers have been invited by student groups or educators. Some of these riots have resulted in both bodily injury and property damage. We've seen the widespread rise of racist anti-Semitism with calls for the genocide of all Jews. And as we speak here today, there are encampments on campuses across the nation. And any attempt to engage in constructive dialogue is drowned out. The sad truth is that these situations have become so commonplace and numerous, it's impossible to count them. It's so commonplace, in fact, that we've developed a name for it, namely cancel culture. Cancel culture has run amok on our college campuses, turning places that were once bastions for spirited and respectful debate and exchange of opposing concepts in the marketplace of ideas into repressive gulags where only groupthink and conformity are deemed acceptable. Cancel culture has turned even the most elite colleges and universities in our country into little more than credential mills, where students hope to escape with a diploma if they are able to keep their thoughts to themselves. What's perhaps most disturbing to me is that what was once dismissible as the rude and uncivil behavior of poorly raised children has spread over into graduate schools and worse, into professional schools, especially law schools. We have seen speakers at some of our nation's most elite law schools shouted down before they could even utter a word. Their audiences have no opportunity to hear what they might have to say. And we've seen invitations for speakers withdrawn before the events can even take place. And we've seen disrespectful and even violent protests break out before a controversial word could even be uttered. We've witnessed suspensions of faculty and administrators for expressing unpopular views. And while most were reinstated or exonerated, the message to students was clear. You have the power to silence those with whom you disagree, and disagreeable ideas will be met with force. And now, with the horrific and brutal terrorist attack of October 7th and the resultant violent reaction to that attack, higher education in the United States and around the world has been shaken to its foundations. Protests calling for the genocide of all Jews has overtaken campuses from coast to coast, with chants from the river to the sea. Over the last few weeks and months, we've seen universities taken over by force by college students who've forced the universities to cancel graduation ceremonies and opening ceremonies of this fall's academic calendar. And some institutions have met those protests with police force, while others have decided to negotiate with the protesters and in some cases succumb to their demands. To be clear, I'm not defending any particular views, especially racist, sexist, homophobic, or any other expressions of hate. As an African American man, how could I? But that's not what is at issue. What is at issue is that those with legitimate but unpopular thoughts or ideas are being targeted and silenced. To me, what is most shocking about all of this is that it is taking place in law schools, of all places. If there's any place where free expression ought to happen, where we should be training students to challenge ideas with other, better ideas, it's in law school. Students are supposed to be learning how to argue, not just on behalf of the causes and issues and clients that they believe in, but also on behalf of those that they do not. In fact, we all do this in our moot court programs by having students argue cases on brief and off brief. How else can a student or a lawyer learn the strengths and weaknesses of the arguments on both sides? So, what do faith-based institutions contribute to our society and culture? Well, I'm happy to report that the things that I just talked about that are happening on campuses all across this country are not happening at the University of Notre Dame, and especially not at Notre Dame Law School. And it's my sincere hope that they never will. This past spring, Notre Dame celebrated its 179th commencement exercises, and it was entirely uneventful, if by events you mean disruptions. There were no signs of protests, there were no encampments, there were no sit-ins, there was no violence of any kind. Sure, there were a few students who were waving small Palestinian flags, and a few graduates wore Palestinian flags on their mortarboards. But there were no shouts of anti-Semitism or anti-Semitic chants, and there were no physical disruptions of any kind. Nothing but a joyful celebration by the graduates, their parents, friends, and the faculty. Now, it could be that there's something fundamentally different about the students who choose Notre Dame as a university and for a law school. But think about it. We have 12,000 students on that campus from every corner of the country and from around the world, representing every demographic and religious facet of society. And the same is true for the 550 students at Notre Dame Law School. They don't all come from the same backgrounds. They're not of all the same race or religion. They don't all agree with each other. Of course they don't. But I would like to think that there's something fundamentally different about Notre Dame Law School that causes the students we have to want to study law at Notre Dame. It's not as though things could not have turned out just as bad at Notre Dame. Upon my arrival at Notre Dame Law School 5 years ago from Stanford in the fall of 2019, I quickly learned that we had 2 high-profile events scheduled on campus. The first was a panel on bipartisanship in Washington, D.C., with Senators Chris Coons of Delaware, Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona, and Senator Joe Donnelly of Indiana. And before that event even happened, I received a handful of hate mail regarding this event. Most of the hate mail read something like this: how could you provide a platform to the enemies of our president? Since when has Notre Dame Law School become a campaign platform for the Democrats? Then, exactly 2 weeks after that event, I got even more hate mail on the eve of a speech to be given by the Attorney General of the United States at the time, William Barr. The hate mail and protests became so overflowing that I decided to issue a statement articulating our policy on free speech. And it read, "The Attorney General of the United States will be speaking here at Notre Dame Law School, and there appears to be a need to clarify the policy regarding speakers at the law school. From time to time, speakers will be invited by the law school, faculty, student groups, or organizations affiliated with the University of Notre Dame to speak at the law school. Sometimes those speakers are government officials responsible for controversial policies. Sometimes they're people who are known to espouse controversial points of view. As long as they are here at Notre Dame Law School, they are free to say whatever is on their mind within the bounds of law. Freedom of speech matters. As Frederick Douglass once said, to suppress free speech is a double wrong. It violates the rights of the hearer as well as those of the speaker. Just as speakers are free to speak, Protesters are free to protest. They must do so, however, in a place and manner that respects the rights of speakers to speak and listeners to listen, and that is consistent with the educational mission of the law school. Student groups and other organizations which hold contrary points of view have every right to schedule their own programs with their own speakers, and these speakers' rights will be protected in just the same way. Notre Dame Law School will neither endorse nor condemn invited speakers. An institution of higher education must be a place where controversial ideas and points of view are expressed, heard, and discussed. Notre Dame Law School is just such a place. I'm happy to report that after that statement, we held the event. Attorney General Barr gave his speech without incident. That statement has been our policy since 2019, and we've had other controversial speakers since, including 6 visits by justices of the Supreme Court of the United States. Just this past year, we've had presentations by Justice Elena Kagan, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, and Justice Brett Kavanaugh. We've also had presentations by Justice Alex Stein of the Israeli Supreme Court and Justice Leona Theron of the Supreme Court of South Africa. And while we've had many on our campus who vehemently disagree with some of the speakers who appear, they nevertheless show them dignity and respect. And if you ask me why we're able to maintain some level of civility and discourse at Notre Dame Law School when it seems almost impossible on other campuses, I can't show you any proof, but I can only tell you what I believe. I believe that we're able to do what others cannot because we are a faith-based institution with a community bound together by a core set of shared values. Now, don't misunderstand me. At Notre Dame, we're not all Catholic. In fact, we're one of the most religiously diverse communities in higher education. Our students come from all faiths and some from none at all. They come from all across the United States and from around the world. They come from rural and urban environments and from rich and poor communities and families. We have Orthodox Jews alongside Muslims, Latter-day Saints, atheists, all mixed in with Catholics and Christians of all kinds. What we all have in common is their choice to study law in a place committed to the Catholic mission. Catholic with both a big and a small c. They chose us, and we chose them. On the first day of school each fall, I give a welcome address to the incoming students. Each year, I tell them what it means to be a Notre Dame lawyer, what we at Notre Dame call a different kind of lawyer. I give them examples of Notre Dame graduates from the past and how they dedicated their lives to make a difference for others. One of the examples that I give, in fact, is David T. Link. And I tell them that whatever we do, whether it is public interest law or corporate law, transactional work or trial work, for large organizations or for individuals, all Notre Dame lawyers have one thing in common. They are dedicated to others, to serving others in a way that lets those others experience the loving, creative power of God in their lives. I also tell them that this education that they're receiving is not for them. This education that they're receiving is for those that they are going out to serve. Those people have real problems, job losses, plant closings, discrimination and racism, personal injury, bankruptcies. They can't be bothered with whether you are offended by something someone has to say to you in law school. And furthermore, you have to face the ugly language, ideas, and words of this world now, while you're in law school. You cannot make the first time that you encounter an offensive idea or an ugly word or thought when you're representing people who have to hear it every day. You need to learn how to deal with those ideas and words while you're in law school. Develop the arguments and strength and fortitude and resilience to be able to protect the rights of people who have to deal with that stuff every day. And I tell them that a law student who is afraid of a word or idea is like a medical student who's frightened of the sight of blood. Words and ideas are what we do as lawyers. That's what we work with. The hallmark of a Notre Dame lawyer is to treat others with dignity and respect, even if, and especially if, we vehemently disagree with or are offended by what they have to say. Our students must understand that they are no longer undergraduates. They're not even in graduate school. They're in professional school. This is where you begin to shape your professional reputation. And you have to remember that the student sitting next to you with whom you disagree will remember you and will remember how you treat them. And if you treat them with dignity and respect, that will follow you for the rest of your career. But it's also going to be remembered if you don't. I tell our students that at the end of the day, whether you're Catholic or not, whether you believe in our Catholic mission or not, the student sitting next to you, the professor who's teaching your class, and everyone you encounter at Notre Dame should be treated as though they are created in the likeness and image of God. Because guess what? They are. Ultimately, how we treat others is not about them. It's about us and who we are and the purpose for our lives. If we claim to be disciples of Jesus Christ, we must treat others as Christ would have us treat them. And how do we know what that is? He told us. He told us in Matthew 25, "When I was hungry, you gave me to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was an immigrant, you welcomed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. Well done, good and faithful servant. Now enter into the home of my Father." And as I say to students at Notre Dame Law School, we have to strive every day to be a Matthew 25 law school. That's what it means to be a Notre Dame lawyer. Now, could I have said all of this to my students at Stanford, where I taught for 22 years? I wonder whether I could have. I don't know if I could have. But at Notre Dame, I know I can, because everyone there knows what our Catholic mission is and has embraced it. Why else come to Notre Dame? And that Catholic mission has an effect. It helps to provide a structured environment where students are free to be themselves without fear of mistreatment or ostracism or cancellation. It builds cooperation across huge divides and creates strange bedfellows. And I'll give you some examples of those. Our Black Law Students Association formed a Black legal history reading group with the Notre Dame Federalist Society. Our Catholic Law Students Association, the St. Thomas More Society, puts on events jointly with the LGBTQ Law Forum. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that they don't disagree. They do, in fact, disagree with each other about some of their fundamental core beliefs. But they don't cancel each other. They don't treat each other badly. They treat each other as though they were created in the image and likeness of God. So how can we fulfill our mission to shape a better future for our country and the world we're called to serve? Well, that brings me to the point of my remarks, namely the future and Catholic legal education. I think that what we've created at Notre Dame is special, not because I'm special or because our faculty or students are special, but because as a Catholic institution, We can all rise to be called to see what is special in each other, and our students act like it. Let me read an email that I received just a couple weeks ago from a recent student at Notre Dame Law School, who's a recent graduate, who's completing a clerkship at the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. It reads, Dean Cole, I would be remiss if I didn't share with you my reflections regarding my time at Notre Dame Law School. I often think about the first-generation African-American woman who walked into Notre Dame Law School feeling terrified in the fall of 2019. There was no way that I could have known that the faculty, students, and staff would pour into me both professionally and personally, and that in just 3 years I would graduate with lifelong confidence and a determination to embrace the future. In my third year, I had an experience overseas that shook me to my core. I will never forget the shock, fear, and confusion I felt when a lawyer in London yelled at me about my religious beliefs and restrictions in a public street in front of my classmates, simply because I refused to follow her and the class into a bar. I'm still moved by my classmates' actions in response. They mobilized without my knowledge before I had a chance to report the incident. They had drafted and signed a letter asking the school to protect me from that lawyer. People asked me why I chose to remain at Notre Dame as a practicing Muslim. My answer has never changed. A group of practicing Catholic students stood up for me when I needed it most. They protected my right to live according to my religion when I was too shocked to stand up for myself. If there's anything that the world needs right now, it's more Notre Dames and more St. Thomas's. And I'm not the only one who sees that. The fact that Ave Maria and St. Thomas were founded at the beginning of this century shows that there's something going on in our society. The people who founded this law school took a sobering look at what's happening to the university in our culture. The very idea of the university is collapsing all around us. And the people who founded this law school didn't just watch it. They decided to do something about it. As a Catholic law school, we at Notre Dame are bound together by the three central tenets of Catholic social teaching, and we try to weave them into everything we do, into every course, into every activity. Those three central tenets are human dignity, solidarity, and subsidiarity. And I think that the reason why you don't see outrageous and disrespectful behavior at Notre Dame is because our faculty and students embrace and internalize these three concepts. Yes, you may disagree with someone, but you'll still treat that person with the human dignity due to someone who is created in the image and likeness of God. Yes, you may disagree with someone, but you recognize through solidarity that we were all in the same boat together. Yes, you may disagree with someone, but through the concept of subsidiarity, we each take personal responsibility for holding up an environment that respects the human dignity and solidarity of our community. Notre Dame Law School and St. Thomas Law School are in a unique position to be able to host important dialogues that simply cannot happen and are not happening on other campuses around the country. The future has yet to be determined, but we can change it. And by we, I mean Catholic law schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Cole. Dean Kelly said I would offer a brief response, so my response is amen. Enjoy the afternoon. No, I will be brief. I'm also issuing a presidential edict that students can be up to 3 minutes late to class this afternoon. The one reason what he said is so rings so true is because moral formation that occurs at a values-based school has to occur in an atmosphere where the willing embrace of vulnerability is commonplace and the willingness to be uncomfortable is commonplace. Beyond what the erosion of academic freedom and free speech portends for moral formation in an academic environment, another threat I see is the relentless and exclusive focus on economic ROI in higher education. What I'm not saying is economic ROI does not matter. It surely does. Student debt, graduation rates, employment outcomes, starting salaries, they all matter. Of course they matter. And at St. Thomas, we take them seriously. US News says we're the best value university in Minnesota. But if that is the extent of our gaze, if we cannot lift our aspirations any higher than that, to go any deeper than that, we are selling our students short. What we're talking about today is not just a feel-good aspect of the mission. It is demonstrably connected to human well-being. If you doubt me, and I won't go through the statistics, Google flourishing program at Harvard University, right? It's flourishing. They have all these really serious research projects going on, and you can read about how they connect moral character. Do you have a moral compass? Do you have moral courage? Can you embrace delayed gratification? Do you practice kindness? It connects to mental health, physical health, overall well-being, in addition to what it contributes to your community. And for this generation of students, it is imperative. One of the things we know about Generation Z is, not all of you, of course, a majority of you report not having a sense of purpose or meaning in your lives. That's a problem for you as a person. It's also a problem for our society. We have to be engaged in these conversations. Ex Corde Ecclesia, which was a short document that Pope John Paul II issued 35 years ago or so as guidance to Catholic universities. One of the things that he says in it is a Catholic university community should be dedicating to help one another achieve wholeness as human persons. Wholeness as human persons. Now, let me give you just one example, and then I'll let you turn to the questions. When I was a young attorney, one of my jobs on this big case I was assigned to, I was the junior associate, so they had me do the preservation depositions, which meant I would go around and I would take depositions of members of the plaintiff's class who were about to die. And we were defending a bunch of companies who operated nuclear weapons facilities during the Cold War. And so the plaintiffs' class were suing, alleging that their cancers were connected to our clients' activities. There was this one deposition I walked into that was literally on this plaintiff's deathbed. It was in the hospital, and I walked into the hospital room, and I remember catching her eye as she laid in bed, and I had my dark suit on and my deposition outline, and I was ready to go. And I realized that through her eyes, I was evil incarnate. Like, I was the companies that were causing her premature death. And at the moment, I was totally paralyzed. I did not know what to do. I'd never had any discussions about situations like this in law school. And so I threw out part of my deposition outline because we could get the information in less intrusive ways. I was listening more. I spent more time just being present, just tried to pull back a little bit. And why it stuck with me is at the time, I felt like I was stepping out of the lawyer's role because I had to get back into my values as a person as I am presented with a woman who is about to die. And I think that was such a loss that I didn't see my values as connected to my professional identity in a holistic, seamless way, right? I was not the product of an academic community dedicated to helping me achieve wholeness as a human person. I had the lawyer role here, and then, sometimes I might have to get to my values, sort of break glass in case of emergency and pull out the values. That was a problem for me. It's also a problem for the broader world. Both St. Thomas and the school that is often known as the St. Thomas of Northern Indiana, we are both working really hard to remedy this situation. I am so grateful for Dean Cole to help facilitate this conversation, and I know that this is a conversation that goes on far beyond a mission luncheon. It has to be an ongoing object of our reflection, discernment, and communal engagement. So thank you for being here.
So I'm going to let everybody go quickly, especially the students who have class. Just 3 final things for you. One, a special thank you to Dean Cole and President Vischer for your comments. There are questions on your tables that I encourage people to take with them. If they need to leave now, you're also free to stay and discuss or think about for yourselves. They all relate to the lecture. Number 2, if you'd like to hear more from Dean Cole and President Vischer, they actually have a fireside chat tonight at the Basilica of St. Mary. So the reception for that starts at 5 and the program starts at 6. All are welcome for that, as well as the Red Mass next week at the Basilica on October 9th. And third and finally, Dean Cole, we are so grateful that you were here today to speak with us. And in addition to our gratitude to you and your wife Angie for being here today for the Mission Roundtable, we have a bit of a surprise for you because at the University of St. Thomas School of Law, we have what's called the Dignitatis Humanae Award, which is presented annually to a member of the national or international community whose life and work demonstrate a commitment to preserving the dignity of all people. And so with your work on religious freedom, your dedication to human dignity, the rule of law, and the inherent equality of all people as creatures made in the image and likeness of God, we are thrilled to honored to bestow upon you the 2024 Dignitatis Humanae Award, including, so please give it up for Dean Cole. And so in addition to a plaque which we'll be receiving, we also have this limited edition replica statue of St. Thomas More, the patron saint of lawyers. So thank you, Dean Cole. May God continue to bless you, your family, your work, and the mission of the University of Notre Dame and the University of St. Thomas. Thanks very much, everybody.